Right, hello everyone. Adi here. Welcome. Welcome dreamers. Welcome travelers. I wanted to do a little experiment to open possibly a series. We'll see how quickly bored I get. What's the response and all that. I wanted to do a little reading. Maybe to introduce you to the sort of things I read to looking for inspiration for the designing of that role playing game, Mon. So this is gonna be. I hope can read that. I'm not going to read that into one sitting. I'm going to take a break and cut the thing and edit it a bit. You have to go to suffer, to endure my French, my fucking French that I'm trying to get rid of for ages. And I read out aloud a lot. I love reading, and I got into the habit of reading aloud things. And I thought, to practice to improve my game mastering. So I thought, why not record some of it? That people might as well, get a feel for. But I mean, there could be some content, on this nascent YouTube channel. So this is not something like I didn't even read it all. Possibly I should try, and I should have read it before even trying to read it to you. So it's gonna be full of like blunders. But never mind. And I'm not even sure it's something I would recommend reading. But I thought it'd be a fun read, something not super, not exceptionally, high. This is the little story called A Little Knowledge that you find in the box set, the original box set of Dark Sun. A game I have not played. I've never played any D&D. Once as a player for a short, like 1-2 hour session that never led anywhere else. And I will not GM it. Just because it's too late. It's too late. I didn't grow up learning that game or learning RPG with that game. So, and I'm not, I read so much stuff. Other games are also, I'm reading for the content. And for the, to get some material to inspire myself for the designing of Mon. And that's what I'm doing with Dark Sun. I don't know the rules of D&D. Well, it's a D20, roll above, equal or above, bit of difficulty. There was the taco. I don't know if I pronounce it. I don't know the nitty-gritty of Dungeons and Dragons second edition stuff. Well, I don't know the whole. I'm not into I'm a 3.5 guy. I'm a 4th edition guy. I admire that this saga is something. I read a bit. I know some of the history. I read some about D&D, about the role-playing game history. The epic of that hobby, how it came about and stuff. So anyway, I thought that'd be a fun a fun, possibly even humoristic way to start this dev blog, the Mon's Dev Diaries, by reading you this little thing to show you where I delve, where I dig stuff, where I get my inspiration from. We'll talk about like my reading list at the moment, where I'm at, and what I'm gathering from that. So now let's go back to A Little Knowledge by Jerry Olchian. This is a little fiction to introduce the flip book adventure of the box set, the original box set of the role-playing game Dark Sun. And this is a sort of a little dive into the world from the perspective of a few like some sampled, characters, and it's supposed to show us the world and how to approach it. And yeah. So I'll be running a PDF in front of my eyes on my screen. I have my Ableton running, recording. I don't usually read on my computer. I'm a book man. I'm a book person. So I have the reprint. I have the reprint, but to record better, I thought I want to have the mic. I want to have the mic really near my, near my mouth, and sit straight and stuff. When I read, I'm on my rattan chair, and it creaks, and maybe the mic wouldn't be at the best angle. Maybe I'll do well, should I film myself? No, I thought I would have the text scrolling for you as well. So I think it's going to be only my voice today, yeah. Plus my face is covered in castor oil, so I shine, and I must look like like a weird slug, a French slug. So I don't want to show my face today. Nah. So, guys, here we go. A Little Knowledge by Jerry Olchian. The lightning bolt came out of a clear sky. Jedra, busy haggling over the price of a new water skin, flinched as the bright blue flash illuminated the food and clothing and harness stands around him. In the same instant, a thunderclap rattled the entire bazaar and echoed off the abode brick walls of the 1- and 2-story buildings surrounding it. Jedra turned, ears ringing, to see a 4-slave sedan chair on the ground, only a few yards away, the overweight Templar it had carried angrily brushing sand off his black robe of office, while 3 heavily muscled slaves frantically righted the chair. The 4th slave lay on the ground, a patch of melted sand a few inches across bubbling beside his smoking body. The slave must have stumbled and pitched the Templar out, Jedra supposed, and the Templar had killed him for it. Case closed. Activity had stopped in the bazaar, but as other came to the same conclusion, it picked up again. Jedra turned back to the water vendor, a leathery old elf with an eye patch over his left eye, and said, "All right, 2 ceramics for the water skin, but only if it's full." The elf peered at Jedra, no doubt trying to judge how far he could push this young, skinny half-elf. But at last he nodded. "Done," he said, and he filled a teardrop-shaped leather sack from a barrel at the back of his tent, careful not to spill a single drop, while Jedra dug out his pouch for 2 fragments of ceramic coin. They were the last of Jedra's money, and if he was to eat today, he would have to find work or scavenge something he could sell. Taking the skin of the elf, he drained a fourth of its content in 2 long swallows, then slung it around his shoulder by the strap, the weight of it comforting. At least he wouldn't go thirsty today. The Templar was already gone when he turned around again, as was the sedan chair and the slave's body. All that remained of the incident was the small, glossy pool where the lightning bolt had melted the sand. Ever curious, Jedra kicked at it with the toe of his sandal, and a piece of glass flaked off the top. It was several inches across, and an inch or so thick in the middle, but thinner around the edges. He bent down and picked up the fragment, then nearly dropped it again when he looked into it. There, amid the bubbles and streaks, dense, a tiny upside-down image of a thri-kreen. He looked beyond the glass. The actual creature stood across the way, its 6-limbed, mantis-like insectile body glistening in the sunlight as it examined a githka, a pole arm with blades at either end at an armorer's stall. The thri-kreen seemed oblivious to Jedra and his glass. Cautiously, lest he be less fortunate a second time, Jedra looked through the glass again, turning slowly and watching the upside-down bazaar slid by backward. No one noticed that they had been turned on their heads, if indeed they had. Jedra put his free hand out beyond the glass to see if he could feel any sensation. A point of bright light slid across his wrist, and when he paused to look at it, he felt a sudden sting of heat. The glass had burnt him. Jedra rubbed at his wrists, but he smiled. The glass must still hold a bit of the lightning bolt that had created it. That might be worth something to the right person. He glanced at a spice stand draped with herbs and roots, a stand that was rumored to be a black market outlet for the things used in the creation of magic. The proprietor would probably buy the glass from him. He took a few steps toward the stand, then stopped, realizing he was reluctant to part with his new treasure so soon. A half-breed elf with no home and no magical training didn't often find himself in possession of wondrous devices. He had no doubt he would have to sell it eventually, but the day was still young and his hunger was still bearable. He would see what else the glass could do first. He found a quiet spot just off the bazaar in an alley lined with continuous mud brick row houses. Their wooden doors and windows were closed tight to hold in the cool air from the previous night, giving Jedra privacy to experiment. Just a few minutes, he discovered the glass's major power. In just a few minutes, he discovered the glass's major power and the reasons he had been burned. When held at the right distance, it made things seem greater than they really were, including the heat of Atha's coppery red sun. Why most things remained only images while the sun actually seemed to appear beneath the glass was a mystery, as was the reason why objects beyond arm's reach of the glass were turned upside down. He had just ignited a dead leaf, no doubt blown into the alley from the king's garden, since few of the freemen living in the row houses would willingly spend the water to keep a plant alive, when he felt a presence in his mind, as if someone were watching him. He had learned to trust that sensation. He looked up to see a human nobleman of about 60 years, his hair as white as his robe, standing at the far end of the alley, mouth open in astonishment. Cursing his carelessness, Jedra stood and began to walk quickly toward the bazaar again. The man must have seen the leaf bursting into flame and would certainly draw the obvious conclusion that Jedra was using the glass to power some sort of magic. Just as obviously, Jedra was not a Templar, and by law, only Templars and the Sorcerer King himself were allowed to use magic. A commoner caught practicing it could be sold into slavery, even executed. Unused to magic or its implications, Jedra hadn't even considered that danger. He considered it now. Suddenly sweating, he sprinted for the bazaar, hoping to lose himself in the crowd, but he had hardly made it a dozen paces before the noble found his voice. The shout of "Stop him!" pursued Jedra out of the alley, and he emerged to find everyone looking in his direction. None of the dozens of choppers made a move to catch him, probably thinking him an ordinary thief. But when the noble emerged from the alley behind him and shouted, "A magician! A magician! Stop him!" they sprang into action. A tall, massive half-giant with arms the size of Jedra's legs swung a sack of grain off one shoulder just as Jedra ran past, catching him square in the back with it. He staggered forward under the blow, but kept his footing, only to slam into a compact, muscle-bound dwarf. The dwarf's blocky head reached only to Jedra's chest, but high enough to burst his new water skin with the impact. He dodged around the dwarf, but the entire bazaar seemed out to get him now. A noble's order was almost as good as law, especially an order the Templars would so obviously support. None of the crowd wished to be caught disobeying that order, lest they be accused of aiding in an escape. Such people often found themselves sharing their quarry's fate. Quarry. We'll look at, these things offline. Jedra whirled and leaped back into the alley, dodging dwarf and half-giant and bowling over the noble, but he skidded to a stop when he realized that the noble's cry had brought people running from the other end too. He was trapped. He looked to either side, but saw only the closed doors and shuttered windows of the row houses lining the alley. Could he leap into a window sill and from there to a roof? Roll a d20. Not likely, but he could think of nothing else to try. He crouched to spring, but when he jumped, it felt as if he had kicked a hole in the ground rather than launched himself into action. He heard astonished gasps from the crowd and looked down to see a shimmering circle of darkness beneath his feet. He had just enough time to scream before he fell through. Oops. He landed on his feet on hard-packed dirt, but the remains of his abortive leap and a sudden rush of disorientation combined to send him sprawling. He threw out his hands to stop his fall, and the glass flew from his grasp to skitter to a stop in a circle of ash next to a pair of dark leather boots. Straining to see in the dim light, Jedra raised his head to find who the boots belonged to. A short, wiry man with dark curly hair stood before him. The man bent down to pick up the glass. "Who are you?" asked Jedra as he stood and took stock of his surroundings, though the circles of ash around the man's feet told him plenty. I was thinking of something else, if I should record my screen capture already or not. Anyway, going back up the paragraph. "Who are you?" asked Jedra as he stood and took stock of his surroundings, though the circle of ash around the man's feet told him plenty. He was a magician and not a Templar either. Templars drew their power from the city's sorcerer king, but other magicians had to draw upon the life force around them. Every time a magician cast a spell, he drew his energy from the plant life and fertile soil around him, If a mage wasn't careful, he drew all the life force from an area, reducing it to ash. The man didn't answer. He examined the glass carefully, nearly dropping it when he saw upside-down images of the room slide through it. "Oh," he said. "So this is what caused all the commotion. Is it you or work?" Jedra had no idea how to respond. He looked around him and saw that he was in a one-room house, with a cot in one corner, a plank table and 2 chairs in another, a wooden chest and cabinet in a third, and a workbench covered with scrolls and wands and unfamiliar tools in the fourth. A window in one wall opened onto a shared courtyard. I thought he was somewhere underground. Well, never mind. A window in one wall opened onto a shared courtyard and allowed a shaft of sunlight to illuminate the room. The window in the opposite wall was shuttered, but Jedra could hear the mob shouting in confusion just beyond it. Obviously, the men had rescued him with some kind of spell, but for what reason Jedra couldn't guess. Finally, he simply said, "Maybe." "Good answer," the man said. "Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Dawn, mage and member of the Veiled Alliance." Jedra considered making up a name, but there seemed little point in lying to a mage. "Jedra," he said. Dawn smiled. "I was right to rescue you, Jedra. You have powers the Alliance would love to learn. You have heard of us, haven't you?" The super, very highly secretive Veiled Alliance. Disclosing first encounter. Jedra nodded. Of course he had. The Veiled Alliance was supposedly a league of mages opposed to the Sorcerer King and his Templars and to unscrupulous magicians in general. They worked to put life force back into the world rather than use it up to power their spells. They were a secretive bunch whose existence Jedra had only half believed until now. I was looking through the shutter when I saw you practicing your burning spell," said Dornell, as he squinted to see the images in the glass. "I assume this is used for that as well?" He swung around toward the open window. "Don't look at the sun." The mage lowered the glass and studied Jedra from beneath narrowed brows. "It magnified things, even sunlight. You could burn your eyes with it." "Oh," Donald examined the glass with renewed interest. What were you doing with it?" "Experimenting." "Oh, of course." A subtle change in the noise from outside made Donald step to the window and peer through the cracks in the shutter. Then he turned suddenly away. "They brought in Templars to search the area for magic. We've got to go." He walked to the cabinet, pulled out a cloth traveling bag, and began to throw clothing and valuables into it. The lightning glass went into the bag. Jedra noticed. "Go where?" he asked. "We must leave the city for a time," said Dorno. I risked a great deal in stealing you away right out in the open like that. Templars can trace the use of magic, and they don't like to be publicly thwarted. They'll search for us for many days before they give up." "Days?" "That's right. So we would be wise to stay out of their path until that time passes." Don pulled a long, multicolored tunic from the cabinet and tossed it to Jedra. "Here, put that on." Jedra complied, seeing the wisdom in that. At least. He was about to argue about the idea of leaving the city when Don tossed him a leather sack and said, "Keep that out of sight." Jedra nearly collapsed when he opened it and saw a double handful of silver and gold coins. It never before held even a single silver piece. fortune this size would take him a dozen lifetimes to earn, and at least a lifetime to spend. If Donald trusted someone he'd just met with such wealth, then if Donald trusted someone he'd just met with such wealth, then the man must be a powerful mage indeed. And if so, then he certainly knew more about keeping himself safe from Templars than Jedra did. The boy stripped off his ruined water skin and used its tie to secure the money bag around his neck, making certain it hung hidden beneath his tunic. Donald tossed another money sack into his traveling bag, tied it closed, and stepped to the back door. "Coming?" he asked. Jedra couldn't see that he had much choice, nor if the Templars were looking for him. "I guess," he said, and followed the mage out the door. Within hours, he found himself sharing a cramped cabin in an upper deck of a merchant caravan headed for the city of Tyr. It was hardly a caravan, really, just a single enormous wooden wagon pulled by two equally enormous mechilots, long, wide, lizard-like creatures, with hide thick enough to turn arrows. The wagon they drew looked like a castle on rollers, complete with battlements from which guards could fire on the raiders and wild beasts that roamed the desert. Inside was a warren of decks and compartments with enough cargo capacity to hold an entire bazaar's worth of goods. This wagon's cargo also included slaves destined to labor and probably die on the ziggurat being built for the sorcerer king of Tyr. Jedra shuddered when he thought of the poor creatures huddled in darkness just a few decks below his own. Had it not been for Donald's intervention, he might have found himself in a similar situation. The dry, musty smell of mechilot hide poured in through the single-foot square porthole in their cabin. But closing the shutter would have been worse. They'd only just left the city, but Jedra was already sweating with the heat, and he knew it would get much worse as the day wore on. They needed all the fresh air they could get, even if it did smell of dust and lizard. They also needed the sunlight the window admitted. Donald was examining Jedra's mysterious piece of glass, holding it up to the light and branding lines into the tiny tabletop jutting out from the opposite wall. "It doesn't seem to need life force to power it," he said. "Truly astonishing. What else does it do?" You saw how it magnifies things," Jedra said. He was sitting on the edge of the cabin's single bunk, trying to keep from getting sick with the swaying of the wagon. Yes, and it makes distant things look smaller and upside down," said Donald. "I fail to see the usefulness of that, unless you could actually make something become smaller and upside down. Is there a spell for that? Perhaps." "I don't know," Jedra said. "I don't think so." "You don't think so?" Donald peered at Jedra through the glass. "You know, it's becoming quite clear to me that you know very little about this device. You didn't make it yourself, did you?" Jedra had been dreading this moment. He considered lying, but he knew he'd be caught in an instant. Reluctantly, he said, "No, but I saw how it was made." "Did you now? Tell me about it. What spells were used?" Donald was obviously testing him. Carefully, Jedra described how the Templar called down the lightning bolt and how he had found the glass afterward. "A lightning spell," Donald mused when he was done. "Yes, I suppose there might be enough energy in a lightning spell to make something like this. But if the Templar didn't fashion it on purpose, then I don't suppose he knows anything more about it than you do." "Probably not." "And you know next to nothing. You're not a mage at all, are you? No, Jedra admitted. Hopefully, he added, but I bet I could learn. Donald laughed softly, and his laugh sent a chill down Jedra's spine. Oh, no doubt you could. You've got potential. I can sense it in you. But I see no point in training in my own competition. He waved an arm and Jedra felt his muscles lock into place. The wagon lurched, one of his wheels, no doubt, falling into a circle of ash that suddenly appeared beneath it as the magician above cast his spell. Unable to keep his balance, Jedra toppled to his side on the bunk. With effort, he could still speak. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "Retrieving what's mine." Donald knelt beside Jedra and removed the money bag from beneath the boy's tunic. "Thank you for carrying this past the gate guards for me," he said, pouring into his hand a collection of crystals and amulets that would have marked anyone as a magician on sight. "I wasn't sure we'd make it past them unchallenged." Donald had cast some kind of illusion on the bag, Jedra realized. He kicked at the magician with all his strength, but his spellbound leg hardly moved. "You used me," he hissed. "I did. Get used to it. It's going to happen a lot where you're going." "Where's that?" For answer, Donald merely pointed downward. Then he waved his hand again, and Jedra lost consciousness entirely. I'm getting into it. Yeah, I'm a bit. It's full of hiccups. Sorry for my French, but yeah, just like an adventure. They possibly even played through that. Jedra woke to intense heat and the smell of dozens of sweaty, unwashed bodies. The only light came from two barred windows set indoors on either end of the hold, the doors themselves opening only into dim companionways, but the boy didn't need light to know where he was. Donald had sold him into slavery, probably for little more than the cost of his passage. He'd taken back his tunic, too. Jedra now wore simple breechcloth. He sat up and looked around him. There were 20 or 30 others in the hold with him, all bound at wrists and ankles with heavy leather manacles and tied to the walls with ropes attached to the collars around their necks. Jedra saw that the slave master hadn't been picky. There were humans, dwarves, an elf, even one of the insectile Thracrian. "What did you do? Cross the wagon, master?" a female voice asked. He turned and saw a short, round-faced human woman sitting beside him. She wore a halter in addition to her breechcloth. "I trusted the magician," I said after a moment. She laughed, but not unkindly. "Not a wise idea," she said. A dwarf, 2 people beyond her, did laugh, unkindly, but not at Jedra. In a voice like distant thunder, he said, "You should talk, Templar." "What?" The other slaves laughed. Jedra stared at the woman in open amazement. She? A Templar? "Wrong," she said to the dwarf. "I was a healer. My powers are psionic, not magical. And to be a Templar, you've got to know magic." Jedra knew next to nothing about psionics, mental abilities that some people could call upon instead of magic, save that such powers supposedly didn't require life energy to fuel them. He had wondered if His own ability to know when people were watching him was psionic, but he had never before found anyone who could tell him. He was about to ask the woman beside him, but the dwarf wasn't through taunting her. "You worked for the Templars," he said. "That's practically the same thing." "Slaves work for the Templars too?" She spat back at him. "But you got paid for it. Blood money," he said the dwarf. Jedra normally wouldn't have gotten mixed up into someone else's argument, but he walked to talk with this woman. Besides, he couldn't help notice that, given a bath and a chance to brush out her shoulder-length brown hair, she would be rather pretty. It was enough to make him say, "Does it matter? We're all slaves now." The dwarf growled. "Yeah, thanks to the likes of her. And maybe you too, eh? You like Templars, do you?" Stunned by the sudden accusation, Jedra stammered, Of course not. I mean..." "Stay out of it," the woman's voice said clearly in his mind. "I can take care of myself." Aloud, she said, "Leave him alone. And leave me alone too, or I'll heal your mouth closed for you." "Ah," the dwarf snorted, but Jedra noticed that he shut up. The woman turned her attention back to Jedra. "So, just how did trusting a magician get you here?" Jedra told her the whole story about the piece of lightning glass, ending with Donald's betrayal. "He told you he was one of those who wear the veil?" she asked. "That's right. Well, that was his first lie. The Veiled Alliance really are honest magicians, for the most part. Sorry. But they're secretive as thieves. When it comes to talking about it, and they hate people like this Donald." "I wish I'd known that before," Chidra said. She laughed again. We all wish we'd known something we didn't, or we wouldn't be here, that's for sure. What's your name, anyway?" "Jedra. What's yours?" "Kayan." 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 Jedra looked up and down the slave hold, but the other slaves had already lost interest in the two of them. He leaned close to her, anyway. Softly he asked, "How did you do that? When you spoke to me in my mind?" "You mean sending thoughts? It's a simple psionic power." It wasn't quite like hearing her voice, but Jedra understood her words perfectly. His intention to ask about his own ability vanished in a sudden, more immediate question. "How far can you reach with that?" he asked excitedly. "Depends on how well I can visualize the person I'm trying to contact," she said aloud. "If it's someone I know I can talk to them almost anywhere. Otherwise, they've got to be close. Then you can call for help." She shook her head. "Who would I ask? Most of the people I know were the ones who put me here in the first place. They'd think it was real funny hearing from me now. But there must be somebody. Look, nobody I know is going to come after a caravan just to rescue a couple of slaves. So unless you know someone, the Juradai would." The voice was, "Oh, the Juradai would," another voice. The voice was high and pure, and came from directly across the hold from Jedra. It's the elf, I guess, yeah. He looked up to see an elf staring at him. His eyes were set close in a narrow face, and his nose was slender and long. Everything about him was long. Even bent at the knees, his legs stretched nearly across to Jedra. And his reddish blonde hair reached the floor despite being braided. He was like an exaggerated version of Jedra himself, because they are absolutely long. The elves in Dark Sun, they are like, out of measure. He was like an exaggerated version of Jedra himself, whose elven features had been rounded and shortened by his human heritage. "What?" Kyan asked. "I'm Galar, of the Druadai tribe. And people would come for me if they knew I was here. They'd attack a caravan just for you." Galar laughed. Galar is the dwarf, right? I guess. "There's plenty of treasure." Oh no, Galar, he just presented himself, I'm stupid. Galar laughed. "There's plenty of treasure on board too," Jedra said to Kyan. "You can send a message to his tribe." Kyan shook her head. "I don't know anyone in his tribe, so unless they're traveling along right beside us, I can't reach them." "You could try. And get myself blasted unconscious by the guards? Huh? How would they know you'd done anything?" She looked at him like he had drools on his chin. He had drool on his chin. "One of the guards is a psionicist. That's one of the ways they keep slaves in line. He'll be watching for escape attempts." "Oh." Kyan's expression softened. "Look, I'd try it in a minute if I thought it'd work, but I know my limits. I can't contact any random elf out there. Just not the way it works." Jedra nodded, feeling hope drain out of him, but a sudden thought checked his plunge into despair. Jedra nodded, feeling hope drained out of him, but a sudden thought checked his plunge into despair. "Wait a minute. These psionic powers of yours, are this something you can teach?" "Well, you've got to have some inherent ability, but otherwise, yes, it's possible. Why?" Jedra nodded toward Galar. "You could teach him. He knows plenty of elves." Kyan looked at Jedra as if he'd just suggested escaping by a trapdoor and then shown her one at her own feet. But she'd been a slave long enough to know how debilitating false hope could be. "Well," she said cautiously, "it might be worth a try." Galar, they soon discovered, had all the telepathic ability of a rock. He couldn't even make himself heard psionically across the slave hold, much less across the expanse of desert between him and his tribe. Jedra, however, surprised them all. With only a few hours of Kyan's coaching, he learned to send his thoughts to anyone in the hold, even the Thrycreen. His control was terrible. Everyone near his intended target heard garbled voices in their heads as well, but the raw power behind his sending was more than Kyan had ever seen before. "You'd better stop," she suggested after a particularly strong blast had reached half the slaves in the hold. There's no way the guards could have missed that. They might not care about a little telepathy among the slaves, but they are going to do something about it if you keep it up." Jeddah sighed. He'd been given a glimpse of something incredible within himself, then told to close his eyes. "I think I should try to contact the Druadai," he said. "You admitted my power is stronger than yours. I might be able to reach them." "No," Kyan pounded the deck between them with her fist. "You don't know what you're talking about. Your unfocused thoughts wouldn't make it beyond the first dune. You've got to learn control first. She leaned back against the wall. Wait. Bide your time. Sooner or later, an opportunity will come along, and then maybe you can use your talent. Maybe, Jedra grumbled, but he supposed Kyan was right. He would wait for a little while. He soon learned that the easiest way to wait and escape the heat was to spend as much time as possible unconscious. He leaned back against the wall and let the creaking of the wagon lull him to sleep. Jedra floated face down in a pool of water. The bottom was far out of reach, easy dreaming. But the water was so clear, only a faint shimmering told him he was seeing through anything but air. He drifted peacefully along, watching his shadow slip over the sand below. But when another shadow blotted out his own, he turned to see what cast it. He found himself suddenly sinking downward. He thrashed his arms and legs, but the water wouldn't support him. He hadn't been breathing while adrift. Now he needed to breathe desperately but couldn't. The foreign shadow extended itself toward him, and suddenly Jedra felt a hand clasping his arm, pulling him upward. His head broke the surface, and he gasped in a breath, blinking in astonishment at his rescuer. It was Galar, still bound at the wrists, but behind him Jedra could see an entire tribe of elves. He saw her gaily colored tents, their herds of long, beetle-like pack animals called kanks, their willowy children playing in the sand. What is that? Jedra sat up with a start, momentarily disoriented to find himself back in the slave hold of the merchant caravan. He had seen a tribe of elves. He could still see them clearly in his mind. Could his sleeping brain have used some sort of psionic vision to locate the Juraday? It was possible. Kyan had told him he had other untrained skills besides telepathy. Jedra turned to ask her. As a side note, I'm really inspired. I should read the complete psionic player's handbook or something. There is a guide. I need to get more into psionics. I want to get inspiration for Mon's Chaos Magic, the mage magic system. I think, psionic powers, they have something to do with the mage, the magic, the Chaos Magic, the mages use in Mon. We'll talk about that. I have couple of studies to do around the magic system for the mages. Anyway, because there will be 3 magic systems, one for the mages, one for the shamans, and one for the priests. They'll play very differently, etc., etc. So, parentheses closed. Jedra turned to ask her, but she was still asleep. And now that he was using his eyes again, the image in his mind started to fade. He closed his eyes and tried to concentrate. Yes, they were there. A whole tribe of elves camped out near a desert oasis. He could still see them, but he knew he couldn't hold on to them for long. It was now or never, he realized. Concentrating hard on the elves in his vision, he tried to focus his thought in the way Kyan had taught him. He felt a hint of recognition, a faint twinge of contact. It was enough. He summoned all the energy he could muster into the single thought. Maybe some of the... opening another side note, there is something in Mon, still in designing at the moment, of course. It's the moonworm. Moonworms, they are implanted into, young, uh, promised shamans, shamans in training. Once their abilities have been confirmed, their talents has been, they're on the path, they're implanted a worm, a magical worm in their brain, and that helps them enter the spirit world and communicate with spirit and communicate through the matrix, the network of the spirit world, communicate between shamans and diplomats, because some diplomats are equipped with that as well to do long distance conferences and stuff. So, and that worm will work like a cyber deck with optional apps and stuff. You could add talents to it and stuff. So this type of mind telepathy is definitely something that will be in the rack of the possible equipments you can add to that, the abilities of a moon worm. I'll let you know one day if I will discuss that, the moon worms. So I'm losing my so he's contacting the elves. At range of contact, it was enough. He summoned all the energy he could muster into the single thought. Galar of the Droa Die is held captive in a caravan a day out from Auric on the road to Tyr. Retribution came suddenly, and with such intensity that Jedra cried out as if he were being burned alive, for that was exactly what it felt like. He writhed in agony, feeling his skin peel away in sheets of flame. The pain was worse than anything he had imagined possible, and it went on and on, far longer than it would have if he had really been on fire. A real fire would have killed him by now. Then as suddenly as it had come, the pain went away. Jedra collapsed on the deck, gasping for air. Karen lifted him to cradle his head on her lap. "You had to try it," she said. "Dream," Jedra whispered through the memory of pain. "I saw the elves in a dream. Saw my chance." "Your chance to get us all punished." "Your chance to get us all punished," the dwarf growled, eyeing the door warily, but no guards appeared. Galar looked to Jedra and asked, "Did you reach them?" "I don't know." Jedra's body shuddered involuntarily with the release of tension. "I couldn't tell." Jedra asked Cain. Galar asked Cain. "Could he really have found them in a dream?" She shrugged. "Who knows? It's possible, I suppose." "What did you see?" Jedra described the camp, with its colored tents and pens full of kanks. "Colored tents?" asked Galar. "Red and green and yellow, with blue and yellow banners flying from their peaks," Jedra said. Galar shook his head sorrowfully. "I don't know whom you saw, if indeed you saw anyone at all, but the tents of the Droa Die are the color of the sand. Their only marking is the tribe totem on the walls." Galar held out his arm to show them a tattoo on his wrists, an angular, stylized rain cloud with daggers for raindrops. "Oh." Jedra pulled himself up to a sitting position. "I was stupid, I'm sorry." "Don't be," Gaia said. "You didn't know. And I've probably done the same thing in your position." "I didn't know," Jedra said sullenly. "That's starting to sound like my motto." "Don't be so hard on yourself," she said. "You're learning." "Oh, yeah. Yes, I'll be a master by the time I die on the ziggurat." With that, Jedra turned away and refused to respond to any further words of comfort. The wagon rolled on. Exhausted, Jedra slept. This time without any dreams of elves, and when he awoke it was already morning. The guards brought wooden mugs of water and barrels of thin gruel, but Jedra had barely eaten half of his before they unshackled him and led him into the upper decks of the wagon. He expected to be taken to the Sionist and reprimanded again for his offense, so he was surprised when the guard brought him to the cabin where he had shared for so short a time with Donald. The guard knocked, and the mage himself opened the door. "Well, hello," Donald said, stepping aside. "Do come in." The guard gave Jedra a shove, and he staggered into the room. "Thank you," Donald said, tossing the guard a silver coin. Jedra gasped. That was probably more money than the man made in a month. Donald was obviously buying his silence. Sure enough, the guard left and closed the door behind him. "You were holding out on me," Donald said, almost conversationally. "You shouldn't have done that, because now I'll have to use less subtle methods to extract the information I need." He waved his hands, and Jedra once more felt his muscles lock into place. The wagon lurched. He felt himself topple forward and instinctively tried to throw out his hands to keep his balance. Spell crippled, his arms didn't move, but he nonetheless kept his balance, and Donald, directly in front of him, staggered backward, as if Jedra had actually pushed him. "What's this?" the man asked, astonished. He righted himself and waved his arms again, just as Jedra frantically tried to imagine a fist slamming into the magician. Donald rocked back on his heels with the blow, but the renewed binding spell clamped down on the boy with the force of a giant's fist. He fell face first to the deck, striking with a resounding thump. Blood gushed from his nose, and it felt as if he had bitten his tongue. "Your pitiful little tricks won't help you, boy," Don growled, kicking Jedra repeatedly until the half-elf nearly fainted from the pain of broken ribs and a fractured skull. Jedra tried to scream, but the binding spell wouldn't allow it. He tried to strike out psionically, but the pain prevented him from concentrating. Satisfied at last that Jedra had subdued, Donald dragged him by the heels into the patch of sunlight shining through the porthole. Jedra felt the heat on his bare back, then a sudden burning. Donald was using the lightning glass on him, of course. "Now," Donald said, "you will tell me everything you know." He relaxed the binding spell enough to allow Jedra to speak, and the boy let out his breath in a long, gurgling scream. At last he found his voice. "Stop!" he shouted, turning his head far enough to see the magician kneeling over him. "I'll tell you anything you want." "You'll tell me the truth," Don said, drawing the point of heat slowly across Jedra's back. "Starting with what other powers you have and how you invoke them." Cursing and weeping with the pain, Jedra told Donald what little he knew, but the magician obviously didn't believe him. He held the glass over the boy's back, demanding more, until Jedra wished he had some hidden knowledge to give Donald so that the torture would end. At last Jedra screamed, "I don't know anymore. Kill me or let me go, but stop hurting me." Donald leaned back. The great, voice acting, guys. Alive. Donald leaned back out of the sunlight and scraped sweat off his brow with the edge of his hand. Donald leaned back out of the sunlight and scraped sweat off his brow with the edge of his hand. "You're in no position to make demands," he said. "On the other hand, I'm beginning to think you're telling the truth." He gave Jedra one last burn, just for spite, then went to the door and shouted for the guard to put the boy back in the hold. Oops. This time his wounds were real. Jedra was dimly aware of being locked up again, and as he got burned by a psychic fire, now by sun rays magnified by glass. I mean, it's the slogan, yeah. Face the fire of the dark sun, a world ravaged by sorcery. It's the motto of the Dark Sun World box set. Cover. So the sun, sun is your friend. Environment. Opening a side note. Environment will be a huge thing in a huge thing. Would be its thing in Mon. We're looking to design in the process, of designing and drafting now, mechanics on environments, expenses, it'll be called, like landforms and various, travel mechanics about them, and disease and various demonic variations around those lands, curses and dissonant storms and all sorts of things. There will be environmental truth in Mon for sure. I really want the planet to have some, faces and personalities and, a life. Yeah. But I mean, really as if it played it played its role, because it does. Mon is actually the name of the planet, right? The game will take place on, and it's the spirit of the planet that is not running the show, but it's taking part in the ground there. In the grand scheme of things. Yeah. Closing the parentheses. Now, where were we? This time, his wounds were real, yeah. The sun, environment and stuff. Jedra was dimly aware of being locked up again, and of warm hands touching him, and of Kyan and Galar discussing his injuries. But he was beyond caring. He wanted only to die. Even death was denied him. Jedra felt strength pouring back into him with the same relentlessness which it had been ripped away, healing and revitalizing his wounds. It took time. He was aware of the wagon moving again, and of the day wearing on into night. He was aware of Kyan holding onto him throughout. She was doing this, he knew. She was lending him her strength. He woke with the dawn, aching and hungry, but healed. Kyan looked gaunt with fatigue. When the guards came with food and water, he made her eat and drink most of his, despite her protests that he needed it as much as she did. "You gave me too much of your own strength," he said. Then, more softly, "I didn't know such a thing was possible." "Of course it is," she said. "That's how healing works. All of my powers are like that. Sharing thoughts, sharing ability, sharing health. It's all the same sort of thing. Sharing ability. She shrugged. Well, if you got something you can do, but I can't. And if I've got something I can do, but you can't, then we can put our heads together and do them both at the same time. Jedra could feel a sudden excitement building in him. What if you try to share the same ability? Does it get stronger? Depends on what you're trying to do. Why? What would happen if we both tried coding the Druidai? Kayan snorted. Will you forget that idea? Wasn't it enough that you almost got yourself killed? Not if we can make it work this time. Look, you've got the control. We need to actually reach someone. I've got the power to get us there, even if we don't know just who we are looking for. I was close last time. I know I was a little more control, and I'd have made contact. You think I know. If you're wrong, then we both suffer the guard's reaction. I can't heal you again if I'm hurt too. The dwarf said, whether he's right or wrong, you'd better be able to take care of the guards before you try anything. Another escape attempt, they'll probably punish us all. And if they do, I promise you, you'll regret it. We've got to try something, Jedra said. We've got to escape this caravan before we get to Tyr. Well, I have no objection to escaping, the dwarf said. You just make sure we do escape when you try it, though. He's right, said Kayan. It's a long trip. We can afford to wait for a better opportunity. I don't want to wait. Well, you're going to have to, she said, because I'm going to help you get yourself hurt again. Because I'm not going to help you get yourself hurt again. Jedra looked to Galar for help, but the elf only held out his slender hands in a gesture that said as plain as words, what can we do? Little sip, cold tea. A bit bitter, but whatever. If I was on Athas, I wouldn't mind. About midday, the caravan came to an outpost. The slaves could hear shouts of joy from the wagon guards, but those shouts soon turned to dismay when the guards saw that the outpost had been raided recently. The wagon stopped only long enough for the guards to sift through the ruins, then started up again. At night, when they brought water, the mugs were only half full. When the slaves complained, when the guards growled, "Be glad you get any. Raiders poison the well. We're all on half rations till we get to the next outpost." Voice acting, guys. Live. No comment. Don't be self-conscious too much. The slaves had been getting the bare minimum already. Half that was hardly enough to keep them alive. They made it through another day and a half before a sandstorm blew out of the deep desert and forced them to a stop. And there they stayed for 2 more days, listening to the howl of sand-laden wind battering against the wagon's closed hatches. The second day they got no butter at all. I love this setting, the setting of this big, roiling, construction, castle on wheel, wooden wheeled caravel, galleon or something, I really I want to introduce. There will be stuff like that in Mon for sure. Pulled by Gicht, Mon's version of dinosaurs. I will talk about Geeked. I'm really, I'm excited to have the Geeked be a very special feature of that universe. Who wasn't in love? Who isn't? Well, I guess. Anyway, love or not, dinosaurs are they're our actual dragons, are they not? So, they have their own story. They were not native of the planet. They were imported on Mon. Anyway, you'll know more about the Geeked, who imported them, how they were received by the planet, how they messed up the entire ecosystem, were never accepted into the spirit world of Mon because of that. Because they were the end of an era, right? And for the Neanderthals, the Golog, the native humanoids living there, that was a bit of a change. That was the beginning of a new era for them as well. I will talk about all that. Another side note on Mon's design, world building. So, end of the side note, closing the parentheses. They closed, they got no water at all. Yeah, this big construction rolling through the desert. It's good. It reminds me a lot of the anti-grav, caravan of Jabba the Hutt as well in Star Wars. Anti-grav stuff as well in Mon planned. There is a certain species that is apt with magnetic powers and stuff. So they will devise these kinds of transports, anti-grav transports. Because we are talking space fantasy, right? Sci fantasy. I was thinking about like, what if I was to, put Mon in a box or on a shelf somewhere. I would be maybe mythic space fantasy. I was thinking something like that. Anyway, so let's go. Their mouths and tongues were too swollen to allow speech. They have given up on their cargo. Just checking if it records. Yeah, it does. They have given up on their cargo, Cain said in Jedra's mind, when the evening water time came and went without a show of guard. Now they are hoarding what's left for themselves. I think it's time we tried calling for help, Jedra answered. I know he can talk as well in her mind, himself. No, why not? We've got nothing to lose, do we? We're going to die in this hold in a day or two anyway, unless we do something. Cain said nothing. Jedra could hear her labored breathing in the dark beside him. Let's at least say we died trying. After a long time, she answered, let's see if we can try and live to tell about it instead. Nice. That was a good. I like that little exchange here in their mind when we just got to see that he can now talk in her mind as well. He's a well-trained now. Somewhat he trained himself in that, and that change of that surprising decision she makes here. Let's see if we can try. When he says, let's at least say we died trying. After a long time, she answered, let's see if we can try and live to tell about it instead. The convergence felt a little like the sharing of thoughts. So there must be, I guess there are mechanics like that, yes, sign assist mechanics, in the game, yeah, in D&D second edition. We can share psionic strength powers, whatever PSP is it. The convergence felt like a little like the sharing of thoughts. But this time their combined consciousness grew until they felt like a single incredibly powerful being. The slave hall took on a shimmery, not quite substantial quality, as if the linked Jedra and Kayan existed on the higher planes that was only loosely tied to reality. I have like Dragon Ball Z vibes here. It looked much like Jedra's underwater dream. But when he had seen the elves, when he had seen the elves. So I'm getting distracted. I'm thinking of more and more things as I read. Unlike in his dream, they could move freely here, directing their attention wherever they chose. Cautiously, lest they alert the psionic guard to their presence, they drifted through the wagon's walls and out into the desert, searching for a tribe of elves. The sandstorm was a whisper of motion, nothing more. In the dream, Jedra and Kayan became a swift, sleek-winged bird darting over the desert. The minds of other travelers were great funnels down which they could slide, only to find themselves looking out of strange eyes at the interior of wagons or tents. No one belonged to the elves they sought. Attends, wait. The minds of other travelers were great funnels down which they could slide. Oh, they bounce from mind to mind. That's a cool mechanic. That's cool. The minds of other travelers were great funnels down which they could slide, only to find themselves looking out of strange eyes at the interiors of wagons or tents. No one belonged to the elves they thought they sought. They searched outward in ever-widening spirals, leaving the storm behind and speeding over the dunes faster than any real bird could fly, rising higher and higher to see more desert at once. Sorry. Little blurb. Until finally they found an enormous well leading down toward dozens of tents pitched at the base of a mountainous dune. Again, becoming hungry here. It's about breakfast time. But I want to read that in one go, I think. Yeah, they found an enormous well leading down towards dozens of tents pitched at the base of a mountainous dune. The tents would have been hard to spot if the dreamscape hadn't exaggerated them out of proportion, for they were the same greyish-yellow color as the sand. Their walls were decorated with the stylized cloud-raining daggers that Galar had shown them. Found them, they thought together. They dropped toward the largest tent, felt themselves being drawn into the mind of the elf inside and looked out through his eyes to see a bard playing a harp to a dozen or more elves reclining on woven rugs. I like that they bounce from mind to mind, seeing through their minds, seeing through their eyes. That's really cool. It's mind travel. Taking note of that. I mean, physically taking note of that. My little good old paper notebook. Mind travel. The long journey. Up. Noted. This is live design, guys. Well, this is not design. I'm fishing. This year I'm taking it easy. I can type that well. I have like my wrists are fucked. I have this, yeah, taking shitloads of supplements, turmeric, and all the whole cohort of supplements and I to get my body regenerate better, so I can get rid of inflammation. You know, the life of a human being, looking to do something and sabotaging himself while doing so, and trying to repair his own doing. So yeah, I'm looking, sit straight, take care of my eyes, don't read too much, the good, get through like good positive habits, not try to focus too much on getting better or being healthy, focus on something that has a side effect, brings health, brings, something. We were talking yesterday about it with my partner, that if you like pick your goal wisely. A little side note, philosophical side note, practical kind of as well, because it appears that you never get what you want in life. I don't know. And if you get it, maybe it's not enough, or it's not what it was you thought it could be, or it should be, or you deserved, or there's always like anyway an element of life mixed into it. So by picking something, you can be sure that if that's the goal you pick, you will never reach. So you're better off pick something that's unreachable in the first place, yeah? Something that carries you like, through deserts and mountains and past them. So that because if your goal is health, if your goal is to have a healthy life, then you'll be focused on not being sick, There's this negative, always this shadow effect of the thing we chase, right? And then we'll never be, I don't know, healthy enough, or it's the thing they carry their own, burden. Everything is kind of like a double of itself. I don't know if it's the human condition. I don't know if it's the life and death effect. I don't know. There is something. If it's to do with consciousness, our own shadows projected, onto the walls of the cavern and stuff like that. We'll talk about, those sort of things. I don't want to make a segue too long. I don't even remember where I started and where is the story here. The sandstorm. Yeah, mind travel. They see through people's eyes and stuff. That's really cool. Yeah, because notebook, mind travel, the long journey. Okay, noted. So, they enter the mind of this bard, playing the harp, to a dozen or more elves reclining on woven rugs. The elves' clothing made up for the lack of color on their tents. Men and women alike wore loose, rainbow-colored blouses and pants. Desert life had darkened their leathery skin to a deep brown. Jedra's and Kayan's host became aware of their presence, and quickly they sent Galar. Galar of the Druadai is a slave in a caravan caught in a sandstorm 5 days out from Urik to Tyr. They had no time to listen for a response. The tent and its occupants swirled as if they were smoke blown by the wind, and suddenly Jedra and Kayan were adrift over the desert again. The god, they realized, he heard our ascending. A whirlwind danced across the dunes toward them. The god's attack on their minds rendered visible in the dreamscape. Kayan and Jedra became a bird again. I don't want to make too much side notes, but the dreamscape. So in Mon, could that be that they send their thoughts through the spirit world? I guess so. Yeah, I want to see. You see, because here they see the physical world, yeah. So they kind of like glide. They detach their mind, and it travels through the in the physical plane, like as if they were like spirits in this realm, right? They are not seeing the spirit world as such. They call them the dream. They call that the dreamscape here. Possibly things I don't know about the psionic powers and the setting, the background of it all. Anyway, we'll read the supplement and tell you once I understand. Now let's move on. The guards' attack on their minds rendered visible in the dreamscape. Kyan and Jedra became a bird again, darting in and out around the whirlwind, seeking some sign of weakness where they could press an attack on their own. Inside, the part that was still Kyan said directly into his mind. They flew over the top and down through the center of the funnel. The whirlwind writhed like a snake, trying to throw them out, but they were faster. When they reached the point of the funnel, they grew larger and spread their wings outward with the force Jedra had discovered when Dawn had attacked him. The whirlwind spun into fragments, leaving a dark shadow of itself in its place. Jedra and Kyan slid into the shadow and found themselves in a silent, unguarded cave. They had knocked the guard unconscious. "Kill him," Jedra said. "No, heal him, so no one else knows anything happened." Kyan answered, "Including himself." Oh, nice. Yeah. They wound their way through the dark caverns of the guard's mind, sealing off whole sections of it as they passed. That, again, another side note, but I really want, there's something with netrunning here. The spirit world, psychic powers, and the netrunners in Shadowrun, more so in Shadowrun than in Cyberpunk, but, you know, it's really like the spirit world of those, well, Shadowrun on top of that has a magic system. I have to read again the shamanism in Shadowrun and what about the spirit worlds. But the Matrix, I kind of want to inspire the shamanism play mechanic. You know, in Mon, I want to inspire that from net running. I think there could be something cool to really make the difference between the mages. They do like mage the ascension, ars magica stuff where they combine like spheres and stuff. Then you have the shamans. They go on like sort of like spirit quests, and they run they do runs in the spirit world and for spirits and stuff in exchange of powers, or they just and the priests, it's more about the priests, it's more about the parish, the influence you wield and that you transfer onto the gods and receive powers in return for the influences you send over. But the gods are yet not gods. In Mon, we don't. They are spirits. If they're anything, gods are spirits, but they are actual. We'll talk about the sidereals and the sky monsters and all that. Gonna be a good one. There's a church like worshipping some kind of like Cthulhu dimensional being, cosmic mega monster feeding on planets and stuff. So, and the cult is so as a priest you're part of one of those cults, yeah. So that would be the mage, the shaman, and the priest. Like they would really play different. We'll make sure they play different. So, another segue that got me lost. They got into the dark caverns of the god's mind, sealing off whole sections of it as they passed. They let him keep just enough psionic ability to monitor the slaves, but not enough to harm them, and they blocked his memory of the battle completely. They left him snoring peacefully in his cabin, then dissolved their link. Okay. Coming out of Convergence felt like losing half their intelligence. Jedra wanted to join again immediately, but the new fatigue in his dehydrated body warned him that he had already paid a high enough price for their temporary enhancement. Doing it again would have to wait for better days. The sandstorm blew over in the night, and the wagon moved out again the next day, reaching another outpost by evening. This one was still standing, and for the first time in 3 days the slaves received water. Their strength slowly returned, and Jedra and Kayan began to hope they might survive long enough to learn whether or not their efforts had come to anything. The other slaves weren't even aware at first of what Jedra and Kayan had done, but since they had already gotten away with it, the two finally decided to tell their fellow prisoners. At first the others were cautiously optimistic, but when another day passed without action, their mood began to grow ugly.
"The elves aren't going to come,"
said one.
"We don't even know they exist,"
said another.
"Should have known better than to trust a half-elf boy,"
a third muttered.
"A half-elf and a Templar,"
the dwarf put in.
"Feeding us a false hope, so we'd think they were with us."
Galar spoke up. "If my people heard the call, they will come." "They heard it," Jedra said. "Give them time." They were a long way away, but inwardly, he wondered, would they come? He got his answer that evening, when a sudden commotion broke out on the upper decks. Shouts and the pounding of running feet echoed down the companionways, and the wagon lurched to a halt as a loud crack of thunder split the air. "Link up," Kayan hissed, and almost immediately she and Jedra were back in Convergence. Link up, nice. The wagon became insubstantial, and their consciousness slipped away and upward to watch the battle. Nice. This is OP. The desert was covered with elves and their beetle-like kanks. Armed raiders swarmed like ants up the sides of the wagon, hacking at the guards with swords and overpowering them by sheer numbers. A silver eagle with iridescent wings flew through the dreamscape, breathing fire upon the defenders. The elves had a psionicist as well, it seemed. A tiny whirlwind rose toward it, the greatly diminished wagon guard returning the attack, but even as they joined battle, a third warrior entered the dream. Warrior entered the dream. It came as a giant black bat, but the bat was different in texture from the eagle and the whirlwind. It had a soft-edged fuzziness about it, as if it were somehow less substantial than the others, and its face was recognizably human. Donor, Jedra realized. Does he have psionic power too? Oh. He's fighting with magic, Kayan said. That's why he doesn't look the same as the others. His insubstantiality in the psionic vision evidently didn't affect his ability to enter the fray. The bat swept over the eagle and the whirlwind, spitting lightning bolts ahead of it like spears. It attacked indiscriminately, blasting both with multiple strikes until the eagle fell smoking from the sky and the whirlwind blew away into nothing. Then it turned its attention to Jedra and Kayan. They had been hovering overhead as a bird again, But as the bat rose toward them, their combined intellect fashioned a barrier, a sheet of glass that trapped the lightning's fury and held the bat at bay. Lightning glass, Jedra thought. Exulting in his newfound abilities, he bent the glass to match the shape of the piece he had discovered in the bazaar, and suddenly the bat beneath it glowed white hot, fled, and disappeared in a cloud of greasy smoke. The dreamscape shook as if gripped by an earthquake, and Jedra and Kyan tumbled out of Convergence to find the slave hold full of elven raiders, 2 of whom were slicing through their bonds. The leader of the elves, a heavily muscled warrior who bled from half a dozen sword slashes, advanced into the hold. He grinned, hold. He grinned when he saw Galar and said, "You look like walking death." "So do you," Galar replied, and the two embraced like long-lost brothers. "You may all go free," the elf warrior said to the slave, "but take nothing with you. Everything in this wagon now belongs to the Juradai." Galar nodded to Jedra and Kyan. "These are the ones who called you here, he said. The warrior bowed to the half-elf and the human. "In that case, you may take whatever you wish, and you may travel with the Juradai until you reach the safety of your own kind." "Thank you," Jedra said. "There's one thing in particular I'd like to retrieve." He took Kyan's hand and led her out of the slave hold, up narrow companionways, choked with elves already hauling the wagon's cargo away and onto the passenger deck. Smoke seeped from beneath Donald's cabin door. They opened it cautiously, holding their breath against the stench of burned meat, and looked inside to see the magician's body lying on the floor, his charred flesh curling from exposed bones. Horrified at the spectacle, but unable to look away, Jedra stepped into the room. The floor was barely scorched around the body. It was as if the magician had burned from the inside out. How could he have done such a thing? He whispered in his mind. While talent can be unpredictable, Kyan answered. Jedra stared at the body until he was forced to breathe, and then finally said, "I think we need to tame it, then." The lightning glass rested on the floor near one crisped hand. Jedra picked it up and turned away, but Donald's traveling bag sitting open on the bunk made him pause. He upended it, and along with the clothing out fell two small leather sacks. One held magical amulets, and the other was full of money. Yay! Loot! Jedra took them both and left the room. "These will probably be useful when we are going." "Where we are going," he said as he closed the door behind him. "And where is that?" Kyan asked aloud. "Some place where we can find a real member of the Veiled Alliance," he said. He led the way out of the wagon's interior and down the gangplank to the sand where the elves were piling their booty. Kyan blinked in the sudden brightness. "Why the Alliance?" she asked. "Because there's still too much we don't know," Jedra replied. He saw her puzzlement and went on. "Ignorance got me into this mess. If it hadn't been for you, I'd have never gotten out of it. But even now, I know just enough to be dangerous. If we are going to survive in this world, then we need to master the forces that shape it. And for that, We need a mentor. We? She asked. Jidra grinned. Well, after all we've gone through, am I assuming something I shouldn't? She shook her head and smiled. No. We sounds just fine to me. The end of the long journey. Well, that was not bad. That was a cool little piece. Nice insight at the world. Why do I need my breakfast? I guess you too. And guys, let you go. That was just a quick look at the stuff I read to document my studies and looking for inspirations for the design of Mon. So those who are still here. I hope you're still alive, well fed, not thirsty. Beware of the fire of the dark sun. In this world ravaged by sorcery. It was dark sun. There are loads of cool little tropes and stuff that were really inspiring. I took notes of it all. So we just read that. There will be more. I'm not going possibly. I don't know. There is some cool stuff in the cards. Yeah, they call it the flip book. There are flip books, and I read through that. Apart from that, it's gonna be a quick read. I've read through the entire core box set. It's really old school. Huh? Really, really old school. I may do a separate video. Reviewing my reading experience of my Dark Sun, of reading the Dark Sun. Yeah. Until then, dreamers, travelers, have a good one. Talk soon.